But strangely enough, there is left in the world today an area as big as the United States
that's never been seen by a human being.
The best is yet to come.
And Hollywood, Disney, etc. have always been the number one child grooming agents in the entire world.
Houston, we have a call.
We destroyed that technology.
People should not be walking around with masks.
That stuff is flat.
There's your flu
last year.
Here's your flu this year.
Literally doesn't
All
even
right,
exist.
ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Hibbeler Effect. Today on the show is a living legend. I know you've seen him before. Even if you see the name and you go, do I know? Who is it? You know exactly who the fuck this guy is. Toronto's own Chris Sky. Welcome to the Hibbeler Effect, brother.
How are you, man? I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm doing well. I just wanted to congratulate you on such an amazing journey of waking people the fuck up and turning their heads and going, you know what? There is something going on. Let me listen to this guy. And now you're running for mayor of fucking Toronto, bro. Like, wow. Can you explain just in your own words this journey? I know it's a long one, and I know you've probably been asked this 100,000 times, but I want it out of your own mouth, man. I want my audience to hear this journey, because I go back and look at some of the videos when you started to get viral and all this stuff, and I'm like, man, this guy's been through a lot of shit.
Well, I just was a guy that was in business. I was in residential design, planning, and building for the last 20 years. So I had a unique position, I guess you should say, because I was in the private sector, but I had to work with every level of the government and the public sector in order to do my business. Yeah. So communication became a facet of my life. I had to work with all the different types of public sector workers, all different types of private sector workers, business owners, all the way down to customers, tradesmen. So I literally just got used to dealing with people, and I got used to solving problems, and I got used to getting things done faster than typically are supposed to be done. So I worked on an efficient platform, and that's just how our business was. We were a very small, tight ship, and we were successful for a couple of decades. And then COVID happened. And right away, I was in a unique position once again, because I was on vacation with my wife for her birthday, and we were in Venice, right as the pandemic hit Venice. Literally, as we got off the airplane, the sirens started at the airport, and they canceled Carnival for the first time in history, and Venice became the epicenter of the pandemic. So I don't know if it was fate or whatever, but we were literally in the middle of it, through thick and thin, right from the beginning. So we got to live through the pandemic in Italy, and we escaped Venice right before they locked Venice down, and we went to Florence. And then we escaped Italy altogether right before they locked Italy down, and we spent a little bit of time in Netherlands and France before coming back March 2nd, I believe it was, 2020, to Toronto. And we immediately started sounding the alarm that they're going to bring this stuff over here. It already started in China. We were just in Europe, and they started locking down Europe. So they're going to lock us down over here. Get ready. And people thought we were crazy. People thought it was nuts. And then sure enough, they announced the lockdown, I think it was March 16th, and they told everybody to close their business for 2 weeks. Before that 2 weeks was even up, I was already creating my first nonprofit, and it was called Back to Work. And it was designed to inform people how to go around the guidelines and around the restrictions so they can still remain getting a revenue, or at least not having to pay their rent, so they wouldn't lose their business, wouldn't lose their homes, wouldn't destroy their family. And that was in March 2020. And I made a video that was over an hour long, and I made a video of all the economic consequences we were going to suffer in the pandemic. And it started with the destruction of the small business sector, which, by the way, represents over 97% of all the businesses in Canada and over 70% of all the jobs in all of Canada. And throughout that pandemic, we lost over 30% of those businesses. And some of those businesses had been in business for generations, not for years, generations, like 100 years in some cases, these businesses flourished. So the government was the number one killer of business, and that had nothing to do with COVID. That was all government policy. Then the government, with their policies with the old age homes and the vaccinations, is the number one cause of death. They just put out some ridiculous report the other day stating that if they didn't do what they did, the deaths would have been 20 times higher. Oh, really? Oh, really? So how did a country like Haiti that had no pandemic response, no mandates of masks or jabs, 11.4 million people on a tiny island that has the worst healthcare system in the Western Hemisphere, as well as the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, yet they only had 950 COVID deaths when we had 50,000? How is that possible?
Reportedly, that allegedly that's the number. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, because everything was a COVID death at that point. You got hit by, they literally had a man who got hit on a motorcycle, died in the motorcycle accident, but because he had tested positive for COVID the day before, they classified him as a COVID death. That's what they did in the United States and Canada. We know this, virtually anybody for any reason died. If they had tested positive for COVID, they called it a COVID death. They could have died of cancer. They could have died of a heart attack. They could have got hit by a car like we just saw in that other example, and they would call it COVID death.
When did that switch turn off though for you to hit the streets, man? Because you hit the streets hard. You were the voice of the city, it seemed as if. And you were out there not giving a fuck. And then, you know what? That's something we need more in this country. I want you to explain how, or when did that start? When did you go, you know what? I'm hitting the streets, man.
Right in March. And it was at the end of March. My wife showed me a online flyer for a protest. And I laughed at first. I'm like, protest? What is, I'm like, I'm not political. I don't protest. I don't care about any of this. And she's like, well, you know, they're going to lock us down. You know, everything's going to happen. So you might as well go and tell people. So we went out there, and it was a fringe minority at that point. And it was people with weird haircuts and bad signs. And CBC showed up because, of course, the mainstream media will show up when there's 5 people, but they won't show up if there's 50,000 of us.
Of course.
And they started trying to paint the narrative that we were like a fringe movement, a disorganized, disheveled, which we were. Nobody knew each other. And I got pissed, and I just grabbed the camera and put it on myself, and I just went on a quick rant because I was just upset and not realizing everybody around me was listening. And at that point, someone came up to me and said, wow, you sound like you know what you're talking about. You should really speak out. And I was like, no, because I already foresaw in the future. I'm like, they're going to come after me. They're going to come after my business. They're going to come after my family. They're going to arrest me a whole bunch of times. They're going to make me look like whatever they want in the media. And I really don't need that kind of hassle. My life was pretty friggin' fantastic at that point. So I said no. And I had all these little old ladies and stuff giving me these sad looks. And then my wife is the one that pushed me to do it and said, you know what you're talking about. People listen to you. And if you don't help people when you know you can, she's like, not only are you going to feel bad, she's like, everything that happens is going to be your fault. So she literally put the fate of the country on my shoulders at that point. And so I felt kind of obligated. So I grabbed the megaphone and I started speaking. And I realized that people listened to every single word I said. Like they were in a friggin' trance. Everyone would just stop what they're doing and listen to me. And I realized they're listening to me because all I was doing was telling people the truth.
And you made sense. You made sense.
Yes,
sometimes when people make sense, it resonates quick. And that's why the people that fall for the CNN and Fox and MSNBC, the psyops and the agendas they run, those people are wearing double masks and getting 4 jabs, obviously. But the people that are in the middle or the people that are already awakened, they need a voice in their mind because they're used to it their whole lives, man. Someone to speak up for the people. And in Toronto, it's been a long time, you know, and Trudeau, and obviously, as you know, in this country, Trudeau is looked at as just a slime bag piece of shit. I have people personally like, oh, you got Chris Guy coming on, make sure you bring that motherfucker up. So, you know, for the next maybe 10 minutes before we have to, because I want to get super, super rockfin dirty with Chris Guy. We're going to get into a lot of topics, guys. But I want to kind of dig into Trudeau real quick and the impact he's had on you. And you know what I mean by that in the sense of it's a fuck him, step aside, I'm coming for you down the road type of vibe. Because I know if you met face to face with him, I don't know how that would go, Chris.
I wouldn't be too happy, but I would definitely keep myself under control. But I can tell you the same thing. I've gone all over the world, and the number one thing I hear from everybody is F Trudeau. In fact, the F Trudeau flag is the number one selling flag on Amazon in the entire world. And there's a reason for that. He is universally despised because everybody can see right through his haircut and his fake smile. And everybody knows that he's literally a puppet with a hand up his ass, moving his lips, or he wouldn't even be able to say a word.
Now, whose hand?
He's the worst leader Canada has ever had, even worse than his father. And that's saying something.
Oh, that is saying something. That guy was a piece of trash. Whose hand do you think? I know that, at that point it becomes speculation, but this is a Hibbeler effect. We speculate all the fucking time. And, because I'm not out in Toronto ever, Canada ever. One day I do want to come out that way, but, I don't know the buzz out there, the feel out there. In this country, we have our organizations that we feel these political people or these celebrities or these, influencers, who the puppets masters are. We always guess. Is it pretty similar in Toronto? Or do you guys have a guess of who the puppets are?
In all our government, it's all foreign influence, whether it's coming from China or whether it's coming from the World Economic Forum or whether it's coming from the WHO. All that matters is it's foreign influence that's designed against the best interests of the Canadians, or in your case, against the Americans. And that's all people need to know. It doesn't matter who the actual individual is. All you need to know is that these are external, international forces that are exerting power and control in your backyard against your own family's interests and against your children's future opportunities. Period. That's all people need to zone in on. And once people realize that and realize that the government has basically been hijacked and the government is not by the people, for the people, but of a globalist entity for a globalist government, a one world government, a one world currency. And we saw that. Everyone that said that was conspiracy theory, well, we got a taste of it during the pandemic. The WHO set guidelines and they became new laws, and they were literally implemented in lockstep, and I'll even use that special word, all around the world instantaneously. And now they want to do it with a digital currency, which is probably the most dangerous aspect of all. You heard the World Economic Forum, once again, talking about this just the other day. What's their favorite part of a digital currency? What's their favorite aspect that they could do that they couldn't do with anything else?
I'm not sure. You tell us.
They will make it expire. So once you're on your universal basic income, if you don't spend your digital currency on your rations and your whatever else you need within 30 days, well, now they're just going to take it back for you for hoarding. So now they're going to make saving literally illegal and literally impossible. So it doesn't matter how hard you work, doesn't matter how many hours, doesn't matter how smart, doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur, you are never going to be able to get ahead. You are never going to be able to create opportunity or abundance for yourself. You will be in a perpetual state of dependence and servitude to your global masters. That is what they are setting up. And once again, we got a taste of it during COVID. COVID set up people. People wanted to be led, but they got bosses. They didn't get leaders. Leaders would be on the front lines with you. Leaders would be fighting with you. Leaders would never ask you to do something that they wouldn't do themselves. And what did we get? We got bosses that told you to stay home, close your business, wear a mask, put a jab in yourself, close your gym, and all the rest of it. Meanwhile, they didn't have to follow any of those rules. Why?
And fast food restaurants are open. No big deal.
No,
because it's about health. Wait,
no.
Because it's about health, Chris. Remember, it's about health.
But the main point I want people to take away from that is, while your gym was closed, while you had to wear a mask in your child, while you had quarantine, while you had travel restrictions, these people imposing those rules on you were exempted from all those rules. That tells you right there that it has nothing to do with your health and safety. This has everything to do with control, and it has everything to do with setting themselves up as the leaders and the rulers, and you as the followers and the slaves. And every single policy that they are now putting forth under the guise of climate change is just another nail in your coffin to make you more servile and make you have less financial independence, less mobility in general, and literally less life and less opportunity. Now the big deal is your so-called carbon footprint. There's going to be a massive propaganda campaign to try to convince people that you need to monitor this carbon footprint. Just monitor it for the good of the planet. Well, once you're stupid enough to allow them to monitor it, what do you think is going to happen next? They're going to set limits. And we know what those limits are because they already signed on to them in something called the Paris Climate Accord Agreement. And they want your limit of CO2 usage to be 2 tons per year or 2,000 kilograms, knowing full well that the average person uses over 10 times more than that. So what is that going to mean? That's going to mean you're not going to be able to fly commercially anymore unless you pay a lot more money. It's going to mean you're not going to be able to drive a car anymore because you're not going to be able to afford it, number one. And more importantly, they are specifically designing the infrastructure to make sure you will not be able to have a car. And what do I mean by that? The 15-minute city. The 15-minute city is being implemented in every major metropolis in Canada, and now it's starting in the United States as well. It's already taken hold in Paris. It's already taken hold in Oxford, England. And every model of the 15-minute city is modeled after the Paris version and the Oxford version. So what do we have? In the Paris version, under climate change, they have now banned every domestic flight in the country that could be done by a train in 2.5 hours or less to fight climate change. So how many more flights do you think they're going to ban? You think they're going to allow more flights? Or you think they're just going to keep getting more and more restrictive and ban more and more flights? So they've already started banning commercial flights that could be done. Now, in Oxford, England, they've already divided their 15-minute city into what they call districts. And every 15-minute city is doing this. Edmonton.
Sounds like the Hunger Games to me.
It is exactly like the Hunger Games, in fact, and that's why they're calling them districts. Because Edmonton has now been broken up into 15-minute city districts. And what's so special about these districts? Well, they'll tell you everything you need is within walking or biking distance. That's a euphemism for saying that you're going to be confined to around 5 square kilometers, just like you were with COVID. Remember on lockdown, you couldn't go more than 5 kilometers away from your house? Well, now they're going to design it so you're not going to go more than 5 kilometers away from your house. Well, how are they going to do that, everyone says? It's very simple. In 2019, while everybody was asleep, they declared a climate change emergency in North America, Canada, and the United States. In 2022, while we were still under lockdown for COVID, they put a new zoning bylaw in place that made every new construction project conform to the 15-minute city and climate change emergency doctrine. And the number one purpose of the 15-minute city is to lower the individual's carbon footprint. Now, the number one thing that each individual has right now to have their big carbon footprint is a car. 9 out of 10 of us own a car. So in their plan, in their actual zoning bylaw, they state exactly what the World Economic Forum states, that private car ownership is wasteful and causing more harm than good. So they want to eliminate more than 75% of the private vehicle traffic on the roads. Of course, government will be exempt and they'll be able to drive. There'll still be taxis, Ubers, police officers, ambulances, and commercial vehicles, but all you peasants will no longer be allowed to drive. And everyone says, oh yeah, well, how are they going to take away my car? Well, besides the fact that they're making carbon taxes like triple and quadruple, you're not going to be able to fill up the gas in your car. They've also mandated that all the new sales of electric cars have to be at least 25% of all the sales. That's by 2025. And by 2030, they want all new car sales to be electric. So if you cannot upgrade your car to electric, surprise, surprise, you're not going to be able to drive. But it's more than that. Now, every new development, construction-wise, is designed to make sure you never go more than 5 kilometers away from your house, and designed so you will not have a car. What do I mean by that? Up until now, if there was a condo building and there's 500 condos in there, they usually have up to 1,000 parking spots. And they'll ask if you want one, or they'll even sell you a second one. And there'll be ample parking for everything else, including the surrounding infrastructure. Under the new 15-minute city climate change zoning bylaw, every single building is now what they call a mixed use building. So if you have a 60-floor building, the top 40 floors will be all residents. And then the middle floors will be all office space. And then the bottom floors will be all commercial retail. Now you go to the parking lot and you'll see for like 400 residences, 200 offices, and a bunch of retail space, almost 800 total units, they'll have something like 200 car parking. Not even enough for 1/4 of the building. And in some cases, I saw buildings with up to 500 residences with only one parking for one vehicle, which is obviously an emergency vehicle, and the rest was all bicycle parking. So more and more condos are being built with less underground parking. Before, you had to have a minimum amount of parking for the building, for the infrastructure, and for future expansion. Now you have a maximum amount of parking, and they encourage even less and less, because if you build every new building and there's no parking for it, how are you going to own a car? If you can only afford to buy in the building that doesn't have car parking, which is going to be every building pretty soon, besides the ones that were built before 2022 and haven't been demolished yet, where are you going to put your car? Answer, you're not going to have one. It's that simple.
And this
what are you
is
going to do?
now,
You're going to park
now,
it somewhere else from where you live? You're going to find a special car parking spot that's like a mile away from where you live and walk there every day to use your car and pay thousands of dollars a month to park your car? No, you're just not going to have one.
This is exactly what you're trying to change for Toronto, and you're trying to set the tone for other people. Are there other people in Canada like yourself that are fighting in the political system in different cities, maybe different regions of Canada that you are aware of, or even in Toronto? Is there anyone? I know there's no one like you, right? But is there anyone like that in a sense of actual change and actual raw truth?
Of course, there's lots of freedom fighters out there. There's lots of people that grew up in the private sector. There's lots of people at the municipal level that would do exactly what I want to do. And me running for mayor, I brought these topics to the forefront of the conversation. They never wanted to talk about 15-minute cities. The Toronto Star, the biggest newspaper in the country, had a headline: 15-minute cities should be the biggest topic of discussion for the election, as it has the largest impact on Toronto's lives. But it won't be. That was their headline. They were literally mocking people, letting them know that this is super important, but we know you're too stupid to talk about it. Well, sure enough, I wasn't. And I made it the number one topic of discussion for the election, as well as the agenda that's targeting children. And we need to talk about that because
now whoa, skirt. We're going to go over the Rockfin, guys. It's going to get extremely dirty. I will see you there. Thank you for supporting me, guys. Head over there now. All right, YouTube, bye. Welcome back to the Hibbeler Fed, ladies and gentlemen. And if you're just coming over from YouTube, thanks for the support. If you've already been on Rockfin, then let's rock. Chris,